Well, hello, strangers. Don't touch that dial. You've tuned in to Neon Static, where once a week you can get a true scary story never told anywhere else. I am, as always, your host, Vi, and today I bring you another story from an old friend. One I met a while ago, back when I was separating. You might remember one of our shared adventures. But this happened before I met her, and having heard it, you might wonder, as I did, how the hell she stayed with the job after this. It's story 120, and here's what happened. When I was 18, I had a problem, likely the same as a lot of others have at that age. Money. I had a job, and while I had done all the right things, I budgeted, I shopped with sales, I didn't go out with friends more than once in a while, and even then stuck to the free for designated driver sodas. I was fully on the struggle bus, like changing in all of my spare change, living on ramen, beans, dried, I told you I did all the right things, and eggs. Hence, I started hunting online, looking for gig work. And that's how I found the special delivery business. Remember singing telegrams? It was like that, had a baby with florists and home delivery services. The deal was, people could call up the business to order anything, flowers, candy, cakes, balloons, and pick from a menu of costumes to have the delivery person show up in. The delivery driver would then make the delivery, maybe sing a song or pass along a special message for the occasion. It was more expensive than just ordering something from DoorDash, but I guess if it's a kid's birthday or a baby shower or something, it's better presentation, more of a moment than just a plain cardboard box on the stoop. The business was run out of a strip mall. The interview I had boiled down to 3 questions. Did I have a car? Did I have a license? And was I available weekends and evenings? Yes to all 3. The job was mine after that. I even got an extra $40 a week for taking loads of the costumes back to the dorm laundry room and washing them. I did it. Otherwise, I fear they would have just been worn over and over without. And as muggy and humid as it was where I lived, that would have gotten gross quick. The costumes weren't anything special. A mix of thrifted clothes for things like old-timey cowboy, and cheap rayon for space astronaut girl, off-brand superhero, or princess, almost all of which were likely scored at after Halloween sales from those pop-up costume shops that crop up around October and disappear by November. Over the months I worked there, I probably wore every combination there was. The annoying ones, though, those were the ones that required makeup. First off, the makeup was grease paint. It made you break out like crazy if you weren't quick about getting it off your face. It was an all-green look for Maleficent. Horned Witch Lady. We were operating in the Great Value knockoff brand here. Or you'd have to go all yellow for the Lackeys, or the Simpsons, Funny Neighbors. And of course, with It fresh in theaters, we had a surge in requests for clowns. Not just nickel smart, either. It appeared there was just a re-interest in clowns in general. I had more than a few requests to show up like a normal, non-murderous clown. Also murder clowns, but that was the same makeup with just some extra fake blood over the top. The normal clown ones were for kid birthdays, all the times I did them. I'd show up, balloons in hand, maybe a cupcake in a little box or some other gift the parents or relatives had arranged. I'd clomp out to the door in character. Remember, they could be watching from the window. The second you were out of the car, you were on. And I'd ring the bell. Maybe pretend it had given me a shock, wave my hand around and pull oh no pain faces. The laughter coming from the other side of the door usually gave away the presence of the birthday kid and their friends. They'd open the door, I'd hand them their presents and balloons. And then, of course, I'd sing happy birthday. I'd accompany with a bicycle horn for some honks, maybe do a shuffle. The kids would laugh, maybe even dance along, and the parents might extend a $5 or $10 bill for a tip. Then I'd go tripping off their stoop, honking the bike horn and wandering back to my beater Civic. I'd always have the pack of makeup wipes already waiting in the passenger seat to scrub the newly sweat-enhanced layer of makeup off my face. Plus a minimum wage hourly, and I was living the good life. Well, good enough to get some fresh fruit from the store with my eggs and tuna. The day this all happened was a Friday. My normal job that paid most of my bills was full-time, 7 to 1600 weekdays. That meant I had a prime 2 or 3 hour window to work on Fridays. That day I had 3 orders, 2 that didn't make any request for a specific costume, and 1 that did. A clown. Non-murdery. For requests that didn't specify a costume, we generally just rolled out in whatever had been picked by a different order. Either way, they were getting something more personal and special than rando dropping off a box. I looked at the map tacked up on the wall of the dressing room, which was really just an old drafty back room that definitely used to be a storage closet. I checked the addresses in my phone, and I placed them on the map to sort of figure out my route. The clown one was all the way out in BFE, some street I'd never heard of, Woodrow Way. The other 2 were closer to actual town, more familiar. I had 2 options. I could hit the closer ones first, working my way out to the outskirts of town, or I could start by driving to the furthest point and working my way back in. I looked at the weather and, even if I used the talcum setting powder, which this was before that huge lawsuit about talcum powder causing cancer. Please don't use talcum powder. Well, even with, the makeup would still be a drippy, smeary mess by the time I got out to the one house that actually wanted a clown. I decided I'd start by driving out to the clown house on Woodrow. I'd do my shuffle and dance for my literal dinner, and then I'd wipe the makeup off, change costumes for something else. Cowgirl, probably, because that one I could wear cut-off shorts in. And then I could make the other 2 deliveries in relative comfort. It'd be a short drive back to the dorms from there, and I could wash the costumes and make my extra 40. Easy peasy. What could go wrong? Well, I wouldn't be here telling this if something didn't. The drive out to Woodrow was quiet. As I worked my way off the freeway and into the warren of suburbs, then out to some decidedly older neighborhoods, the traffic lessened and then ceased altogether. For a Friday at 5, it felt off. I mean, you'd expect to see like school kids on bikes or moms and dads out doing the shopping or driving home from work. But as I made another right, then a left, the houses seemed to be slumping down, sleeping under yards of weeds and other windblown trash. My phone alerted me that the birthday boy's house was up on the next street. But when I made the turn, I saw nothing. I mean, the street was there and the houses were lined up, loitering on either side. But the air was still and thick. There was no cluster of SUVs and cars around the sidewalk, indicating a birthday party. I pulled up and took a look. The house in question looked asleep. Curtains were drawn, no movement, not so much as a single balloon tied to the rusted mailbox to say, Here's where a very special birthday boy is. It gave me pause enough that I rechecked the order form. Woodrow, same house number. This was it. Well, I checked my makeup. In spite of my Civic's heroic attempt to air condition, the cracks were already showing in the foundation, so to speak. I knew I'd better get out there and get the balloons and small present, which was light, probably a stuffy, into the kid's hands before my face melted off and he got accidentally scary clown. I pushed open the door with my usual energy, then half spilled, half fell out. That's usually how I played it for a clown delivery. Make every little movement exaggerated and silly. The silence on that street had me audibly gulping, like a comedian bombing on stage. I straightened up, then turned to pull the present and balloons out from the back seat, looking around. No movement. None. There wasn't so much as a breeze. Everything around me felt too still, too quiet. Ever see National Geographic when they show the lone gazelle at the drinking pond? Well, I have. Enough to know you never want to be that lone gazelle, having missed whatever red flag sent all your gazelle buddies running for cover. I knew, though, that acting like scared prey would be the wrong move, so I doubled down on the exaggerated walk, clomping my shoes to make a defiant thud-thud down the cracked walkway to the front door. If someone was watching, and from the hairs on the back of my neck, I knew there was, the best thing I could do would be to act natural. And when you've got your clown face on and your frilly neck ruffle and pom-pom buttons, natural is goofy. I knocked at the front door and waited, bouncing back and forth, listening for movement. But nothing came. No sound of kids laughing. No parents murmuring about whatever parents murmured about. Taxes, HOAs, Little Muffy's dance recital. There was nothing, not even a TV. I had raised my hand and thought about knocking again, when a sound came from the right. The side yard, which was hidden behind a wood fence, gone gray and splintery with rain. A wind chime. Something light and metallic that clinked a little tune out. I looked around. The brittle, dead grass in the front yard didn't move. If I was hearing a wind chime, it was because someone had bumped into it. A backyard party. Well, that would explain why they didn't hear me knock. All right, then. I stepped back from the door and Waddle walked over to the fence. I couldn't see a gate, but surely I could still make this delivery work and make a funny entrance. First, I'd crouch down and let the balloons peek over the fence. Then I'd hear some kid gasp and cry out. It'd break this weird silent stillness. Then over the fence I'd peek, big exaggerated smile face. Why, what are you doing back there? The whole business. Yeah, I could make this work. Just shake off this weird feeling and lean into being a clown. I knelt down and I raised the hand holding the balloons up slowly, watching until I could tell they were visible above the fence. And then I waited. And waited. But unlike I'd pictured, no delighted whoop from a kid high on cake and candy. No surprise. No parent calling out, "What's that?" Nothing. Well, now what? I crouched down there until I felt a trickle. Sweat, a bead of it, coursing down my temple. I was melting like a candle out in that oven of autumn heat. And worse, the longer I stayed there, the more certain I was that something wasn't right here. I'd checked the address. I'd made a big show of wandering up the walk like nothing was wrong. I'd been imagining different reasons why things weren't going, like every other delivery I'd made. All to help myself ignore what my gut was telling me. Something wasn't right here. And being bent over hiding behind this sagging fence wasn't going to fix it. So I stood up. The fence wasn't tall, so even at a relatively short 5'7", I could see over it. And what I saw took a second to process. The balloons slipped from my grip. They floated straight up in the windless air. I felt another bead of sweat roll, this time into my eyes, but I couldn't blink them. My right eye stung as it rolled in, blurring for a moment the image of an above-ground pool. An above-ground pool with a man in it, floating, face down. And then I screamed. Like my scream, my acceptance of the wrongness broke glass, some kind of glass container that had held everything still and silent. Suddenly there was movement, noise, people. I was shuddering, shaking, but I couldn't tear my eyes away even as I heard people come up behind me, none too kindly yelling at me to shut up. What on earth was I? Some kind of clown? And why was I making such a racket? But I couldn't hear or see them, not fully. The present dropped from my hand, order form still taped to the side. Beside me, I sensed someone taller, someone who smelled like cigarettes, a man. He too was peering over the fence, and too loud. Everything was too loud after all that silence. He was calling out in a donkey bray of a voice. It's Harold. Fiona, call the ambulance. It's Harold. He's drowned." His voice felt like it was echoing in me as I ran past him. Because like my scream had awoken a dozing neighborhood, the waking neighborhood had awoken me, and I was tearing open the fence gate. I fetched a palmful of splinters as I did, and I was running. My eyes were full of the pool and the man. Without thinking, I was over the edge of the pool and sloshing towards him. I still had on the stupid white gloves. It took me a second to get a good grip on him, to turn him. When I did, I saw his eyes, half open, staring back at me. It sent a crazy little rill of terror down my spine, the way he locked eyes with me, and yet with nothing at all. And then I was pulling. I was stumbling backwards, the billowing of my costume slowing me down as I did, but I just leaned back into it and pulled and pulled. I turned when my back bumped the pool edge, and finally, thankfully, something was right. Cigarette Man and the aforementioned Fiona were there, already stretching out their arms to help pull him out and over the edge. I pushed as hard as I could from my end. Pulling him across the water was one thing, but hauling his dead weight up and out of the surface tension was another. They managed to get him onto the ground without dropping him on his head. I clambered out after. The thought of remaining in that pool where a man had... I was out of the pool before I understood it. Then I was stumbling backwards, coming down hard on my tailbone just as I fell into a sitting position. Around me, a couple of people, men and women, folks of the neighborhood I'd just disturbed. They'd put their hands out and shake my shoulders, ask me questions I couldn't hear. My eyes were filled with the sight of that man, floating. Paramedics rushed by. Their uniforms were navy blue. The pool water was blue, but more like an aquamarine blue. Harold's lips were blue too, a shade somewhere in between those. I hadn't realized I'd dunked under the water, but I must have. As I stared at his lips before the EMTs descended upon him, I almost casually turned to the side and vomited up a gout of pool water. It was still cold. I shivered. I sat there, remnants of my clown face melting off in the simmering heat, while people bustled around me like ants. At some point, I was pulled to my feet. Someone walked me to an ambulance, sat me down on the tailgate of it. The present. Someone had retrieved it, put it back in my hands. My gloves were gone. When had that happened? I was staring down at the box. The police were there. Someone had called them. They were trying to question me. Trying, but I was about as responsive as a stuffed animal myself, the one in the box I held. The yellow carbon of the order form. My eyes read the lines like I was running a checklist to see how could I have messed up so bad? How could things have gone so wrong? Clown. Check. Here I was, soggy but definitely clown-like. From somewhere far away, the cops asked what I was doing there. Birthday party. Balloons and present provided. Check. I'd brought everything. Ma'am, is there someone we could call? Not sure you're fit to drive like this. One of the cops was leaning down, trying to make eye contact, but I just kept reading the order form. House number. Street name. Woodrow Avenue. I looked at the rusty mailbox. Even with the orange dappling its paint, the address was clear enough to read, and that way, in Woodrow Way, stared back at me. My eyes snapped back to the cops. He was older, salt and pepper sideburns and mustache. It's the wrong address. His face was puzzled at first, but then his eyes widened, like mine were wide, as he seemed to understand what I had just put together. But from behind him, the EMTs cried out, "We got a pulse!" The chatter from the congregation of neighbors gave way to cheers and cries of relief. And not breaking eye contact, the cop said back to me, "Well, the right address for saving a man's life." I wish I could say I smiled back. The music soared in the background, and the city went on to print my picture in the paper, and my job gave me a big bonus and everyone clapped. But this was real life. And in response to his kind and comforting words, I simply leaned to the side again and yacked up more pool water. Classic clown. Surprise is part of the humor. And that's story 120. If I had a nickel for every clown story I have, huh? But this is a spooky story channel, and many people find clowns scary. I find this story scary too. Not for the clowns, but for the water. I don't swim. It's for good reason, trust me. So yeah, a story with a little something for everyone. Have something to share? Email and social media in the description. I am starting to pop back up on the gram, and the shorts are coming too, for all one of you that wants them. And of course, on platform you've got your likes, your comments, and your subscriptions, in case you want a little reminder next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, when I'll be back again with another scary story. Until then, wear sunscreen, avoid talc powder, and of course, take care, strangers.